let's notice how we can become aware. We become aware by noticing the how and not the why. The why is irrelevant. It's not relevant that the reason I'm doing this is so-and-so, and this is one of the problems that I can talk about because I was a psychotherapist for many years. And one of the problems with psychotherapy is we deal too much with the past. It's okay that my mother and father mistreated me, but my problem is in the here and now. And that's the only place that problem is ever going to be solved. So we want to think about versus simply noticing. And let's be very, very precise here, because this difference makes all the difference in the world. This is a difference that makes a difference. When we're thinking about, what that leads us to is it removes us from the present. You can't think about anything and be in the present. If you're in the present, you're simply noticing. Anytime you start thinking about, you're out of the present. And it removes you, and once it removes you, the only place you can come from is old categories. And tomorrow we're going to go in deep, deep into old categories. Simply noticing, on the other hand, does not remove you. It puts you in contact with what's going on right now with both the market and with yourself. And what it also allows, it allows you to form new categories. And by allowing you to form new categories, the categories are there in the present tense, in the eternal now. And what that permits is, remember the old slide way, way back in week 1, you saw this slide, and over 90% of the people who see this slide, they read this as opportunity is nowhere. What we know is that opportunity is now here. And in this last week, and we only have 3 more days of this last week, we want to make it very clear, being in process, being in the present is the key. And to sum up week 12, end of day 1, let's sum up by saying that what we want to do is stay in the present and practice this using only present tense in your talking for 3 hours, and then move from that to thinking only in the present tense. Watch your thinking very carefully, because if you don't think in the present tense, it removes you and it condemns you to your old categories. And we'll see you tomorrow. Make sure you keep up with your daily pages. Hi, here we are at day 3 on week 12, and I hope that you're thinking in the present and that you're experiencing and you are in process. Let me give you a couple of small, quick, interesting examples to sort of illustrate the difference between thinking and being in process. What I would like for you to do right now is just simply fake a yawn and there, and see what happens. Now, fake the yawn, and what you're going to find out is that there's a place where the yawn takes over, and you just yawn. And that place, that very subtle place of where you're trying to yawn and it takes over, that's the place we want to get to. That's the underlying structure. Let me give you a couple of other examples. What I would like for you to do right now, and I'm going to have to say this without any preview or pretense, what I want you to do is to notice something. And I want you to concentrate all your attention and notice your breathing. Okay? Now, if you're like most people, what you did is one of 2 things. You either held your breath and said, what am I supposed to do here? What you're doing is you're looking for old categories. You're not using the new information. Or what most people do is when you're asked to notice your breathing, we take a deep breath. That's not what we ask at all. We simply ask to notice the breathing, not to change anything, but it's very difficult because our left hemisphere and our old way of living and our old way of surviving is to look for the right categories. This is what we're taught in school. We're taught how to solve problems. We're not taught how to create things. We're not taught how to create profits, for example. Let me give you a couple more examples. In our country today, the president of this country is trying to solve the deficit problem. It'll never happen, because there's some characteristics, some psychological characteristics about problem solving that we're going to address in a few moments that make it impossible for this to happen. Our Justice Department is trying to solve the problem of crime, so we build a bunch of new jails. It's not going to happen. Our medical profession is trying to solve the problem of disease. It's not going to happen, because when you solve a problem, you don't have anything except a solved problem. And when we look at the right and left hemisphere, this is going to become very, very important. Let me give you one more example of something to do. I want you to do something that you've probably done, at least 100 or 200 times already today, something you do very naturally. You couldn't live for very long if you didn't have this ability, but I want you to try to do something, and I want you to notice how you get in your own way when you try to do it. What I'd like for you to do right now, without any preparation, is I want you to swallow 5 times as fast as you can. Okay? Go. Keep going, fast as you can. Swallow, swallow, swallow. Now, what's happening is you're finding that each time you try to swallow, it gets more and more difficult because you're using the wrong part of your brain. And let's talk about these parts of the brains. And let's go over here and let's look at this space 1, which is our left hemisphere here. And one of the jobs of the left hemisphere is to solve problems. Now, another job of the left hemisphere, it has 2 main functions, the left hemisphere. One is to do what we call habituate behavior. For example, when you're learning to ride a bicycle, it's very, very difficult. I mean, you have to do a lot of things and think about a lot of things. Then after a while, you kind of get the hang of it. And then you've got it. It becomes habituated. It becomes in your gut. And it may be 20 years since you've ridden a bicycle, but you can get back on that bicycle and ride it immediately. That's one purpose of the left hemisphere. And that's what you've been working with these 12 weeks with these tapes and with the manuals. And when you work with these, you're habituating behavior. So we take the part, how we trade bit by bit, and then we put it back together. The second problem of the second purpose of the left hemisphere is to solve problems. That's this one. Now, inherent in solving problems, what we're taught, and this is what we're taught in school, this is right and wrong. You solve this problem, you get an A or you get an F or whatever. Inherent in any kind of this sort of behavior is a reward-punishment situation. You get a good grade or you get a bad grade. You do this or you lose your job kind of deal. Now, that always, always breeds dissatisfaction. For example, let's say that you're a salesperson and you win the sales contest. You get to go to Hawaii. Then the first question comes up, well, where do we go next year? We're going to Shanghai, or we're going to Kuala Lumpur, or we've got to do something better. This happens at every level. Reward breeds dissatisfaction. Let's say that you're just a beginning trader and you make $1,000 in the market today. And this is, let's assume that this is Monday. Then what we say is, gee, if I can make $1,000 every day, then by Friday I have $5,000, and then maybe next week I can make $2,000 a day. This is the way it goes. And let me show you how this inherent in this whole activity is it breeds dissatisfaction. There's another axiom in psychology that's appropriate here too, and that is that once you start to become successful, you tend to quit doing the very thing that made you successful in the first place. Let's take an example. Let's say that this is you and you're 200 pounds overweight. Now, you're very uncomfortable, kids are laughing at you, the clothes don't fit right, and this is your ideal weight over here. And you decide to go on a weight loss program. And you lose 20 pounds. Well, they say, now you're only 180 pounds overweight. The clothes don't fit quite as badly as they did. You feel better than you did. And you start losing motivation. Now, what they will tell you is that that first 10 pounds is the easiest because that's water retention. The last 10 pounds is the hardest, the most difficult. Not really true. It's true because it's psychological. Because if you're only 20 pounds overweight, that's not too bad. You don't stand out that much. So as you start to solve the problem, whether you're a company, a corporation, or an individual, you tend to quit doing the very things that made you successful in the first place. Now, there's an underlying structure here that's even more vicious, and that is, what if you do solve your problems? What's this left hemisphere, this Joe Gremlin, going to do? Because his job in life is to solve problems. Now, if you solve all of your problems, this guy's going to be out of a job. So if you start to solve the problem, what's he going to do? Think about that for a moment. The thing he's obviously going to do is to create more problems. I read a couple of months ago a very, very interesting statement about lotto winners. They did a research on people who won the lotto, people who win millions of dollars, who've never had money, who've struggled, who've worked hard, and now all of their problems are solved. And guess what? It takes them, these are people who take their lotto winnings in a lump sum, not the ones who take it over 20 years. It takes an average of just over 3 years for them to get back where they were. In 3 years' time, they had enough money to solve their whole life problems, but the average is 3 years they've spent all of that money on frivolous kind of things. Why? Because their problem solver wouldn't let them solve the problems. Because if the problems are solved, the problem solver's out of a job, and he, Joe Grimlin, wants a job. So we have to take care of this. So the categories then, that creates how we solve the problem, and our categories are another word for our belief system. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about this. Categories come at what psychologists call an optimal learning period. On public TV, and maybe you've seen this before, it's been on there several times, there is a duck, and I do not remember the name of the duck, but whatever this duck's name is, on the first thing that he sees on the second day of life, let's make this clear, he's hatched today. The first thing he sees when he wakes up in the morning is his mother. It doesn't matter whether it's his mother or another duck or a male duck or an airplane or a pickup truck or whatever it is. On public TV, there's a very interesting episode where this one guy had these ducks, he hatched them, and he put them under the wing of an ultralight airplane. So when they woke up the next morning, they thought the ultralight airplane was a mother. So now this guy takes off, and all the ducks follow him. In fact, he had to fly south because they didn't know how to migrate. They had no mother to follow. So he had to fly his ultralight south to make sure they were able to survive the winter. These are optimal learning periods. We have the same thing. For example, let's take a newborn baby. A newborn baby, the first dimension of personality in a newborn baby is optimism, pessimism. Now, there's an interesting statistic here. About 90% of us are born pessimistic. Only about 10% of us are born optimistic. The difference between the two is an optimist thinks they are valued because of who they are, and a pessimist thinks they're valued because of what they do. You can see this in a newborn baby. In fact, before a baby's born, I have a friend who is pregnant at the moment, and she says that this particular kid is going to be a soccer player because he's kicking a lot more than the first baby was. So this optimism, pessimism, he's either a good baby or he's maybe got the colic or whatever, but this affects our entire life. And only 10% of us are born over here, 90% are born over here. As we grow up, and when we're born, we think we know everything. We see the world in a global fashion. We really don't see ourselves as a baby in a cradle, and that's Mommy up there. We see her as an extension of ourselves. As we grow up, as we get a little older and a little older, it becomes apparent that we can't really know and experience everything ourselves. We have to take someone else's word about something. And that usually happens, and this has nothing to do with birthdays, but has to do with maturity, but somewhere between maybe 4 and 6 years old, this person over here goes through a stage called a satellizing stage, and that means they start satellizing just as a rocket ship will satellize around the Earth, a satellite, around some significant other. Maybe a parent, maybe an older brother, it may be a friend or whatever, but these are people who they are willing to take their word for how things go. Over here, this person who sees himself as a means, while the optimist sees himself as an end, this person does not satellize because basically he does not trust the world. And what happens is that he forms some categories that are different from this optimist. He cannot satellize. Now, the next thing that happens, the next big deal comes at puberty. And at puberty, we have a explosion of chemicals. Either in guys, we call it the testosterone explosion. What happens here, this guy has satellised, or this person is satellised, and now they go off and they become a revolutionary. Now, one of the problems, in my opinion, of our country, or the world at this point, is that we don't distinguish between a revolutionary and a rebel. This person does not desatellize. It does not go off because it can't. It never satellized in the first place. It never satellized because it did not trust itself or the world. But it has the same amount of energy that this open-minded person or this optimist person over here has. So what this turns out to be is a rebel. Now, a rebel has the same amount of energy, but instead of using that, a revolutionary will go out here and try to improve society or do something for the world. A rebel is a burn, baby, burn. This is anger. It's anger because it never found anybody it could truly trust, and it doesn't trust the world. Remember what Einstein said. The most important question we can ever ask is the universe a friendly place? And that's basic of what we're talking about right here. So at this point, this produces adults up here, which are two kinds of traders. Now, interestingly, if we start out with 90% down here, we're probably going to end up with around 90% here, around 10% here. And interestingly, about 90% of all traders lose money consistently. Is there a connection between the two? We think so. We sincerely think so. So let's go further now, and let's put this into the adulthood and how this affects our trading and how this adults our living. And let's make an oscillator here, and it doesn't matter what we're talking about, but we have plus on one side, we have 0, and we have minus on the other side. This could be how happy we are, how well we trade, how much money we make. It can be any dimension of personality you want, because we are a hologram living in a holographic universe. So the way we trade is the way we live. In fact, there are a lot of very interesting things we could point out, characteristic that we know about you by watching how you trade. Or we can watch you perform in life, and we can predict very accurately how you're going to trade in the market. So let's take the 90%ers. These are people who feel joy, who feel sadness, who feel joy, who feel sadness. And to the extent that they can feel joy here, to that same extent, they can feel sadness. Now, these people these are the people who do not believe that the universe is a friendly place. These are people who see themselves as means, that they're valued only if they do certain things, if they perform a certain way. The 10%, their life goes much more like this. They experience joy up here that's unknown to these people. They also experience sadness down here that are unknown to these people. The psychological literature, if you want to look this up, unfortunately they misnamed this. They call these closed-minded people. They call those open-minded people. And I don't like the connotation that goes with that. For example, a closed-minded person has many fewer problems than an open-minded person has. For a closed-minded person, the world is black and white. All abortions are bad. It doesn't matter if the mother's life is in danger or whatever. All abortions are bad. These people also need support. So in trading, they want to know what everybody's thinking. They want to read the newspapers. They want to read every word of the Wall Street Journal or Investors Daily. They look for other information because they need this support. These people up here, this is called a peak experience. Now, let's look at this for just a moment. What happens when you have a peak experience? Now, a peak experience is something that's so out of the ordinary, it happens rarely. It's when you sell the top, buy the bottom, the market goes your way, or whatever. Anytime you have a peak experience, anytime you have a peak experience, the first thing you want to do is you want to tell somebody about it. Let me tell you about, we live by the wetlands. Out here close to us are a group of wetlands, and about last Thursday night, a UFO came down, and I went up in this UFO, and let me tell you about this. Well, what happens if you have this peak experience and you want to tell somebody about it, the chances of you, the person you're going to tell, the chances are 9 to 1 that they have never experienced that kind of a peak experience. So they don't know what you're talking about. So after a while of beating your head against the wall, then you quit telling people about it. Now, this is important because these are the naturally good traders. These are the people who do not need the reinforcement of a union or a group or being a member of a certain group or being a member of a certain religion or being a member of a certain technical analysis group or whatever. These people are self-sufficient. They are so sufficient that they can let the incoming information analyze itself. These people are category dependent. They have to have the old categories. If it doesn't fit in this category, it's not right. Prejudice of all kind originate here. And being very frank and political, this is one of the reasons why I believe that we will never have an intelligent, open-minded person leading our country. Because to get elected, the things you have to do to get the support of these people, No one would do this. These are the standalone independent traders that you don't hear a lot about. These are the ones who really make it in the market. These are people who have naturally gotten on this trail. So the question then becomes, let's look at this in another way. Let's assume that this is the optimistic, trusting version, and this is a pessimistic, doesn't trust the world, and let's say that we're all someplace along here, and we want to go in this direction. For whatever reason, we want to approach that to make more money in the market or whatever. We know from psychological research there are two ways to do it. We also know that there's one way that it never seems to work, and that one way that it never seems to work is to go out here by yourself, read a book, get on a desert island, and from reading the book, do it. That's why we have the private tutorials. Another way is that you find a person that you think is further along this way than you, and they become your guru. They become your teacher. That sometimes works. But an even better way is to get a group of like-minded people. This is a leaderless group whose goal in being together is to move in that direction. That seems to be the most efficient. And that's why that we do the private tutorials. That's why we come together, we trade together, we introduce you to other people who've been here, and form a group that we hope will communicate. To review this, let's take this off of the board, and let's now go over to the television. To review what we've been saying, where do categories originate? And remember that the characteristic of the first force dominance, that's people who dream about things and don't follow through, and we want to make certain amounts of money. We're always in motion. And what that does, it wears you out from trading without getting the desired results of winning. This is the very first. This is the lower left-hand corner of this triangle that we were looking at. It also makes you feel that unless you move fast, you will be overcome by the market. And so that builds up tension and pressure makes us stupid, and we make the wrong decisions. Another characteristic is that we tend to explode like a nova. We get very excited, and then we fall back into despondency, into the second force black hole. And the characteristics of the second force dominance, when we're in the lower right-hand corner of that triangle, is it checks creation. And it makes, actually it has a positive characteristic because it makes room for new growth and new possibilities. And second forces come from when your desires conflict with reality. Now, how we handle that in trading is what we call webometry and the cybernetics of trading. Now, tomorrow, what we're going to do is we're going to spend a good deal of time looking at words and how words affect us. So in reviewing what we've done today, we've looked at where our categories originate. We've looked at why that words are important at this point. We're going to look at that more tomorrow. And we looked at how we develop these categories and how they come from very young, when we were too young to really determine whether they were appropriate or not. So we are really trading from like 2-, 3-year-old categories unless we can get out of the categories and fire Joe Gremlin. And remember that the way to fire Joe Gremlin is to simply notice, and primarily the most important thing is to be in process, to be in the here and now, to think in the present tense and to be in the present tense. We'll be with you again tomorrow. Enjoy your evening and do your morning pages. Okay, here we are at day 4. That means we only have one more day this week in the home study course. And to review a little bit about what we were talking about yesterday, we're looking to this week at the psychological part. We want to look at what creates the categories and how we can get out of those categories, how we can fire Joe Gremlin, because all of your upsets and all of your losses are caused by Joe Gremlin, by our old categories. And one of the ways we do this is by simply noticing the words we use. And if you have a child, for example, let's say that you have a child who is 5 or 6 years old, and you take them to Disney World. What happens to that child if you ask him to tell me about Disney World? He'll say, man, it's great, it's wonderful. Those are inclusive words. If you ask the parents or ask yourself as a grown-up how it was at Disney, what you're much more likely to find is that they will say something that's exclusive. Well, It wasn't as hot as I thought it was going to be. Wasn't nearly as crowded as I thought it was going to be. The lines weren't as long, and it really didn't cost as much as I thought it was going to be. Now, notice the difference between those two. One is very inclusive. The child's is very inclusive. It was just great. While the adult's is conditional. Well, it was not this bad. For example, if your wife asks you, where do you want to go eat? And you say, well, I think maybe we'd like chicken. And she says, but we had chicken yesterday, and we don't. This is getting into the exclusive realm. In the market, for example, we say things, well, it was a loss, but it wasn't that big of a loss. Instead of, man, it was great, you know, it was total there. And what we do with that is we form a web. And what you've learned in these 11 weeks is how to put stops above and below the market, because our most important psychological attitude to have is that when we look at the market, we can honestly and truly say, I don't care which way the market goes. If we do that, we're in the web, and we're going to win if we place our stops and our entries properly. What that allows us to do is to be in the market and be in the zone and stay in that zone without effort. And remember that it's relaxed, it's focused relaxation, it's energetic, and there's no worries. We're in the process, we're in the here and now. So what we want to look at today is how these words affect us. In NLP, which is Neuro-Linguistic Programming, they've done decades of research on how words affect our language. And words are like, we call words the cybernetics of trading. And cybernetics is a word that comes from the Greeks, which meant the oarsman, or the guy who held the oar. And what cybernetic means is that with a little bit of force, you can move large objects. And words are the same way, because words words categorize us. If we say, I am a trader, then that puts us in a category. If we say, I am an individual, or I'm a Republican, or I'm a Democrat, or I'm a Libertarian, all of this puts us into categories, and we want to be careful about this categorization. Let's go over and let's again look at where we left off yesterday in our slide program. This is the slide we were looking at when we ended yesterday, Webometry and the Cybernetics of Trading. And the cybernetics of trading, again, has to do with our words, because words are really category. When you say, I am a man, or I'm a woman, that puts us in a category, and it takes away from our processing information on the present moment. For example, I woke up this morning, and I was sleeping next to my wife. Now, my assumption was that she was the same lady that I went to bed with last night, which for all practical purposes sometimes seems to work, but it really isn't true. She was 8 hours older. She might have gotten up with a headache, and I'm processing my information from the old categories of, because I've known her for many years and been married to her for many years, I expect her to act a certain way. We do the same thing with the market, and this is one of the problems with trading, because we take previous categories and try to apply them to the market. Words, the reason that words are important is because basically our words create our images. And if we say something that the market's in a bull run or a bear run, or it's in the fourth wave, or this is a breakout market, those words create our image. We can say that Greenspan is speaking to Congress today, and that creates a whole other image. What happens with the image is that our image creates our emotions. It creates how we feel about something. And those images are our categories, and that functions as a filter for our emotions. So if we get incoming information from a word, and that triggers our image, not the image of the person who spoke the word, but our own image, that then creates our emotions, and our emotions then create or control our perceptions. So the emotional feeling that you have while you're watching this is going to create how you perceive this information. If you're worried about something, if you think you overspent on something, or you're losing too much money, or whatever is happening, that's going to create and that's going to control how you receive this information. Now, our perceptions then control our performance, and our performance creates and controls our prizes. So this is the image that we want to take down. We want to take this and see how it affects us. And remember, earlier this week, we were talking about our two-valued thinking and resistance. And we've got to get some understanding, which then makes the good feelings. So if we start out with good feelings, then the words are not going to create our image. Our good feelings are going to create our image, and our good feelings are going to control our emotions, which are going to control our perceptions and our performance and create our prizes. So we want to start out with the end result. We want to start out feeling good. Again, back to what Einstein said, the most important question you can ever ask is the universe a friendly place? And underlying that question is that we decide ourselves whether the universe is a friendly place or not. The universe is a mirror. It's not a perception. And hopefully you will take that from this study as being probably the most important, that the universe is a mirror. It's an observer-created universe. You're not the end result of it. You are the creator of it. Let's look at this in another way. Words are important. For example, we can change, I cannot make a profit trading, to something that's more appropriate, which is I have chosen not to make a profit in trading. We can even change that by our good feelings to until now I have chosen not to make a profit in trading, to now I choose to make a profit in trading. If we break this down into its skeletal remains, if we really put it on a basic level, then we only have two emotions. Those two emotions are love and fear. And think about that for a moment. What is your attitude toward the market? Do you love the market or do you fear the market? And I'm here to tell you that if you fear the market, your chances of winning are much less than if you change that to loving the market. Think back about the first of the week when I asked you to go to Las Vegas and lose the money. Do you think you could, do you have a love of that or do you have a fear of that? If I ask you to go and double my money, how does your love and fear change? Let's look at this in another way. And here's a formula that we think also works, and we're just saying the same thing in another way. This is our experience, and remember that our images and our categories create our experience, our emotions create our experience. If we add our experience to reflection, and reflection goes back to what we were saying earlier this week about Joe Grimling. The way to control Joe Grimling and the way to start controlling is simply to notice. Notice what he's doing. And if you have experience plus reflection, what you're going to end up with is being a winner. And I'd like to review another slide, the third force that we were talking about. And remember that we have thinking and resistance. This is always on the knowledge level. This is always on the horizontal level. And the only way to get out of these categories, because Joe Grimling and your categories absolutely put you in jail with your categories. You can't get out of the categories. You're in the tunnel, and that tunnel is created by the walls of that tunnel are created by your belief system. And what we want to do is we want to rise above that, and we want to rise above that by understanding the market, and that will allow us to have good feelings, and the good feelings are what really take away the duality between thinking and resistance and allows us the understanding and allows us to create our own reality. And what that means is that instead of solving problems, and remember no problem is ever solved, or when it is solved you don't have anything, that when you create your own reality, then you create your own experience in the market. And we've spent 11 weeks on techniques. We've only spent 4 days so far on the psychology of the market. The psychology of the market is by far the most important. And tomorrow we're going to review some of that on our last day and have some suggestions for you. Just remember right now that we want to understand that what happens, our results in the market, our reality of the market, and the world come from our good feelings. If our feelings aren't good, then reality is not going to be good. So we have one more day together, and tomorrow we'll review a little bit, and we have some ideas for you. Have a good night tonight. We'll see you tomorrow. Welcome to day 5 of this 12-week home study course. I have to admit to you that I have some mixed feelings right now. Some of those feelings are kind of, well, now we have it, we're through with this part of it. And some is, I've really enjoyed doing this. And I hope that you've had fun too, and I hope that you've been able to create some good feelings about trading. The question then becomes, and this is going to be a very, very short day today, the question becomes, what do we do from here? Our best recommendation, my best recommendation, is that you very seriously consider coming to a private personal tutorial. In that way, you will come in here with us, you'll see how we trade, we'll trade together, we'll interact with each other, and we'll show you what we see, because there's no way that we can give you adequate feedback. And in our tutorials and with our home study course, I hope that you will realize that this is a lifetime support opportunity. We are here to support you for a lifetime. Now, you have to understand that's our lifetime and not your lifetime, but we're here for your support. And we feel that once you have gone through this home study course, you're a member of the family. We'd like to get to know you better. We'd like to strongly encourage you to come. Now, specifically, this is what I request that you do now. I would like for you to sit down, and I'd like for you to write me a letter. And in that letter, I would like for you to tell me your experiences in going through the course, where you are now, specifically where you are now, where you think your strong points are, and what you think your weak points are. And we'll get back with you, and we can either talk about this on fax or email or by the telephone or in person. But we're really looking forward for you coming here, because we know that if you read something, you're not going to remember it very often, for very long. If you hear something, you're going to remember it for even less that long. If you see something, hear something, and then do something, then you're going to remember it and you're going to be a part of you. Then it becomes a part of your categories, and our big job is creating new categories. That's much more important than teaching you how to trade, because when you create the new categories, you not only change your money situation, but you change your entire enjoyment of life. And remember that if trading is not fun, you're doing something wrong. If living is not fun, you're doing something wrong. And the way to find out what's wrong and how to make it right is to go to that underlying structure. Remember back in week 1, we said that the 3 principles of chaos is, number 1, that energy, everything in the universe being energy, and that's what Einstein taught us, was that matter is really just energy that's been slowed up to a very slow vibrational level. Everything in the universe always, always follows the path of least resistance. So your path of least resistance may very likely lead to coming to a private tutorial. In fact, in the past, over 85% of all people who purchased this home study course attended a private tutorial. We hope that you're going to be in that majority, because we really, really believe that we have the best record of anybody in the world at taking inconsistent and losing traders from all over the world and making consistent winning traders with what they learn here. And the only way to really learn it is to be here. So this is kind of a sales pitch in a way. This is the bamboo knives and the Ginsu knives and the bamboo steamers part of it. But we'd really like to know you better. Either whether you come or not, we'd like to communicate with you more and better. So feel free to ask any questions. Keep up the morning pages. Those are crucially important. And remember those 3 things about the science of chaos. Everything always follows the path of least resistance. Second principle is that path of least resistance is determined by the always underlying and the usually unseen structure. And then the third thing, which is what we're about, is that unseen underlying structure can be discovered and it can be changed. So we're interested in changing the cause. We're interested in moving from pessimism to optimism. We're interested in taking the universe and making it into a friendly, supportive place. And along with the universe, along will come the market. And it's the best occupation in the world, and you know why? Because you're attracted to it. So take that attraction and do something with it and enjoy life. And may everything that you wish for be the least that you receive. Thank you for participating in this with us. It's been a ball.